Good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time you're tuning in the program called What's Going On in FlintTalkRadio.com. I'm George Moss, the host of the program, and we are very glad to have you with us this afternoon. We're starting a little bit late because the service that we normally use on this network is down for the count, but we're going to do a hard copy, and then we're going to put it on the air later on. But those of you who are tuned in right now, you can see it live, of course, for the next hour, and we'll be here from 2 o'clock to 3. And don't forget, after this program is over at 3:30, we'll have Satara's Black History Corner coming your way in about 30 minutes. And that is Miss Catherine Blake and Miss Catherine Hunter Williams, and they're doing their program from 3:30 to about 4 o'clock. We're very glad to have you with us always, and we want to have you stay tuned. I think we have some interesting things to talk about today. As always, that's kind of like the power for the course here at FlintTalkRadio.com. And we are working hard, as always, to keep your attention and also to grow your confidence in what we do here. Today I'm going to be talking for the whole hour about an article that came out this morning in Breitbart News. It's an interview with one of the smartest persons, I think, on talk radio, and that's Mr. Mark Levine. And he did an interview on his new book called the Liberty Amendments. And these amendments, 11 in number, is what Mark Levine thinks we need to do in order to have the kind of intervention necessary to change the discourse in this country, particularly as it relates to what's being said in Washington and the kinds of things that they're doing up there as they continue to run us into the ground, as they continue to run the country into oblivion. And I'm going to be talking about that during the whole hour. Feel free to call in if you have any comments you want to add. But I do have some definite things I want to say here on the air this afternoon. I want you to also, before we get started, I want you to also pay attention to what we're doing on Facebook. I have to promote that because there's some great conversations going on right now on Facebook. And I think we are right in the midst of it in terms of things we're trying to bring about. And the conversation we have there that goes around all the places that try to keep us from talking to each other and gaining an understanding from a major source of information. That is the information we have out here in the wilderness outside of the power centers, that which is not approved of and have to go through the FCC restrictions in order to be imported into the mainstream. And that's the conversations we're having with each other. And I think those conversations really, quite frankly, are the main ones we ought to be having, because we're talking about some things out here that I don't see on the alphabet soup stations, CNN, MSNBC, you name it. So we're having a lot of dialogue that's going on right now that's very enlightening, and that's the discourse we have with one another, and I think we have to encourage that process to continue and try to grow it so we can begin to talk to each other. I mean, I hear all this talk about speak truth to power. Every time I hear that, I say to myself, as if power feels that it needs to listen to what we're talking about. We're speaking truth to power, and they have gotten in their ears. I mean, they're not listening to us up there in Washington, and as soon as we learn that lesson, we will have learned some of the other lessons. That's what Mark Levine is getting at. We're going to have to do some amending of the Constitution to get power to listen to us. And here's 11 proposals. I'm going to cover, hopefully, in the next hour, 5 of those 11 proposals, which I think are germane to some of the main things he's encouraging to take place so we can begin to have the kind of government that we, in fact, in this country deserve, and that we had at one time in this country before the progressive movement took place, and then took that away from us by, in fact, growing the presence of government in our lives, and therefore changing the way government was, in fact, operating before that, where government was more or less on the sideline. And we had the business community really in charge, along with the people that were regulating the business community, and that's all of us out here, that were regulating it not through all these laws passed by Congress. We were regulating it because we were consumers. and we were letting them know through the power, the dictatorial power, if you ask me, of the consuming class. We don't ever talk about that group being a class, but the consuming class that has upper class in it, middle class in it, lower class in it, and those that's not in any of those classes but still have $1 in their pocket, that can speak to these guys that's actually producing a product, and we can tell them in no uncertain terms, in the sovereignty of the consumer, that we don't like what you're producing, we don't like the quantity in which you're producing it in, and we're not buying it, and we change our mind, we're going to go over here and deal with this other person here until you come back to pleasing us as customers in this country. And that is the dictatorship of the consumers. And that's all the regulatory power that is needed here. We don't need all these regulations in the books, 170,000 pages of regulations, which I've said in the post that I did yesterday on Facebook. It's nothing other than the level of paranoia that we have on the part of the politicians. Before I get to Mark Levine's article, I want to back up just for a second and talk about the post I did yesterday. I did a post, which I'm going to finish up today, but I did a post yesterday that began this discussion about what was in the film called The Titanic, where we were talking about old money and new money. Do you remember that? I think everybody saw The Titanic. It was a well-made film, and I think most of you out there in our readership and our listenership, our viewership, saw that film. And I want to call your attention to one part of it where the person that the person that was Jack, if you remember, he was played by this wonderful actor named Leonardo DiCaprio, a marvelous actor that played the role of this pauper in the film. And you remember that part where one of the person in the upper class that was a product of what is really old money, and that fortune that was there is now expiring, so the mom is trying to get her married into the new money being the ones that are now making their money under a new set of circumstances. The old money, by the way, would be those who, not that this is explained in the film, but the old money were those persons that had made their money in the latter part of the 19th century when laissez-faire capitalism was in place, and they had the politicians on the sideline hold them in check by rugged individualism and laissez-faire capitalism that consigned the politicians where they belong, on the sidelines. In the dustbins where we throw those who are obsolete over there where you have no role to play and simply do your job. Your job is to do those things contained in the Constitution. And beyond that, you don't really have any role to play. The economy should not be run by politicians. That's for the businessmen to run it, and the consumers holding them in check with the non-confiscatory power that businessmen don't have, and they can only get out dollars, not by taking it. That's against the law. Thou shalt not steal. That's against the one of the Ten Commandments. So biblically speaking, and also legally speaking, they can't take it. They got to produce a product in order to get it through providing a service we want and we're willing to pay for. We don't need politicians involved in that. No matter what they're saying about all these regulations they're passing, as if they got to, in fact, keep these guys honest. We can keep them honest by not spending our dollars when they don't please us, and when they do please us, spend our money with them. That's regulation enough. But the old money was made when we had a more pure form of capitalism, where capitalism was that the rugged individual, through his looking around at the society and trying to see what was the need not being met, to which he can then move into that space and fulfill that need. What is a need that is not being met by some other capitalist that he can, in fact, provide a service in order to obtain wealth? Nothing is wrong with that. I mean, through his own greed, and his one to satisfy his greed, he wants to find a place where he can move into a zone that nobody else is occupying, can fulfill a need that nobody else is in fact needing, and therefore can get money out of the proposition where he can fill that need and therefore get a person to pay him for it. So the old money would have been those who were not under those kinds of regulations that suppress that. That's the old money. The new money they were talking about, as they were educating Jack of this over there, this is new money. Over there, this lady was telling him, that's the old money. The new money would be those who made money under different political circumstances, where the government is now realizing that it has a problem based upon the way capitalism operates. It has a problem in terms of being consigned to the dustbins of obsolescence, because what is the role in a capitalist system for the businessman? No role in the economy. The role is basically in the politics, where you are consigned to the role that's found in Article 1, where you will, in fact, make the law. In Article 2, you're assigned to the executive branch of government to enforce the laws made by the legislative branch that's founded and specified their particular domain within the context of what is found in Article 1, Section 8, which enumerates the powers given to the legislative branch. Then Article 2 gives the executive branch the right to, in Article 1, Section 3, Article 2, Section 3, to enforce the laws passed by the legislative branch of government. Go look in Article 2, Section 3 if it's not there. Not at the very beginning of Article 2, Section 3, but it's in that particular section of Article 2. And it says that the executive branch will enforce the laws. Doesn't say anything in there about making the law. Doesn't say anything about expanding the law. It says that the executive branch will enforce the law. And that's pretty much the limits of that authority there. Those are responsibility. That's the responsibility of the executive branch. Well, you know, that kind of says that when the economy is operating as it should in a capitalist system, where those that are after our money and those that have no duty to give them our money unless we're satisfied with what they are producing, that regulatory relationship between the producers and the consumers is all the regulation that's really needed there, because they have no role. They have no role in taking our money, and they don't have any incentive, in fact, to do that which is injurious of us as consumers in the proposition, because they in fact kill us off by what they're producing. What they're doing is reducing the number of customers out there, and therefore reducing the amount of money that they're able to make an appeal to, that they can in fact get the greatest bang for their buck. The more consumers out there, the more dedicated they have to be in terms of pleasing all these people out here, all of whom have money that can potentially make them more wealthy. That's regulation enough. And I don't know why we would buy into we need the politicians getting involved in regulation and passing 170,000 pages of regulation as if they need to come in and regulate the marketplace. So, but then the other thing would be, if that is really how the capitalist system operates, then what would be the reason why the politicians get involved in it? Well, that answer is very clear. How do the politicians in that particular genre justify being reelected over and over again if that role is one that consigns them to the sideline? They got to get involved in this. And we see it happening with the Commerce Clause that's found in Article 1. Check this out and see if it's not there. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, and the Commerce Clause, which are now going to use in 1887 with the Interstate Commerce Act. And they're going to say that that gives them the authority now to pass the Interstate Commerce Act. If you have commerce going across state lines, and capitalists don't want to limit themselves to one state, they're going to definitely want to go across, state lines. So what the framers had in mind was to make commerce regular, where no state can bottle it up and then have it where it's taxed if it comes in this state from some other state. They put the Commerce Clause in there with Congress to make it regular, where you don't have inconsistencies in the commerce. And they're going to now use that to now regulate commerce if it goes across state lines.
Last night I got a chance to watch Atlas Shrugged 2, part, and it's like there's so many parallels between that depiction of that world then. It's a total fictitious time. It's set in 2016, but there's so many parallels with what they were doing, the federal government was doing in that movie, and what very similar to what Obama's administration is trying to implement, like with nationalized health care called the Obamacare, trying to commandeer industries. And basically they're giving you, politicians, they never did anything other than look good on camera and know how to talk. And that's all they've ever done in their lives. And they don't see they can't see the forest of the trees. They don't see that this thing that they think everybody's got a right to, a part of, there's got to be something going on so somebody can get a part of. I mean, like the economy. They want to, well, it's not fair the way it's distributed.
Yeah.
But there's something, at least that's doing something more than what the government will ever do.
No question about it. There's no incentive for the government to get it right, because the government can simply pass off its bad decision-making off to those who are paying the burden for the false notions that are put out there by the politicians who don't know anything. I'd like to see somebody do this as an experiment. They keep on saying that I heard this airhead named Elijah Cummings, Representative Cummings, saying that what the American people want us to do is, in fact, create jobs. You know, every time I hear a politician say that, I want to ask the politician, I want to create a situation for a politician and say, okay, let's say we want to get a job over here in the automotive department, and General Motors is not providing any kind of enough jobs in order to do that. So what is your formula for someone getting additional jobs over here in the automotive company? Or let's just say that since people are outside of the fast food restaurants, and they're demonstrating about they want $15 an hour for a job that I, quite frankly, don't think is $4 an hour. That's the entry-level job. It's not a job for a career.
You know, the other day I was up there. It was on the posting on Facebook about this push the minimum wage up to $15 an hour. Well, I was up here to the Family Dollar up here just down the corner, and I brought that up. Now, one of the guys I was talking to was the guy who worked there, behind the counter. And there's another guy behind the counter with him, and there was a woman standing beside me. And I said, "Do you hear about the push the minimum wage up to $15?" Now, these people are employed at jobs they're not paying $10 an hour. These guys are working, and they said, "How is that is going to make other places this not higher? It's going to affect those people who they think they're trying to help." Now, these people are on the ground. These people are people who should maybe be resentful of not getting paid well enough, but they know what's going to happen, the fallout. Mm-hmm. Why can't these damn politicians see that? They don't work.
That's right. What has been proven about minimum wage laws is that those are nothing but unemployment bills, and we don't hang around as politicians taking a bow for having passed minimum wage laws. We don't wait around to see the effect of those laws, and so every time they pass a minimum wage law, the unemployment rate goes up. But nobody's paying attention by the time that the bowing ends and the policy is put into place, and we see, okay, how many workers are in fact working now after the law was passed, as opposed to who was working before the law was enacted. We see evidence of it everywhere. The turnstiles at the supermarkets, for example, go over there. I won't call any names out of the supermarkets, but ask yourself the question, why they have the turnstile at the one where they just turn your grocery around and you pick it up and put it in the cart? What happened to that person that was bagging the grocery? And there are some stores right now that don't even give you bags. There used to be a time when there was a guy at the end of the counter, he put the grocery in the bag. Have you noticed that the guy, not only is the guy missing, the bag is missing? And you carrying the grocery out independent, and you're putting it in your cart, and you're putting it in your trunk individually, because the person who was making the bag was making a higher minimum rate, so they cut his job out also. I went to see, you were talking about John going to see Atlas Shrugged. I saw Atlas Shrugged last year. You saw it on DVD, and I saw it last year in the theater. I'm waiting. I can't hardly wait for Atlas Shrugged Part 3 to come out, which I hope it will come out later on this year, as was promised. But I can't hardly wait, because at the end of Part 2, they finally brought John Galt. I mean, who is John Galt? And they brought him on the screen, and it ended with them finally meeting John Galt. He's over there in some cave somewhere, because they didn't run him out of the market with their nonsense. And now this businessman who was making things happen shrugged his shoulder and just walked away. And now they brought him back on the screen. They brought him to the screen for the first time. that we didn't see him in parts 1, and we saw him only at the end of part 2. Now we're going to look at what happens in part 3. But, he has shrugged, and John Galt just simply walked away. Nobody appreciated him, and here you regulate him out of existence. Okay, how do you like me now? And he walks away from the task of doing what he was doing, which is, in fact, making the quality of life better and making wealth possible for those that were not doing, there was no wealth before the capitalists arrived. Certainly no wealth in the social system. And so that's going to be a very important thing. But when I went to the theater to see Atlas Shrugged Part 2, and it doesn't matter what movie you went to, what you saw was that when you walk in, the lights are up, and then they start playing the commercial movies, that those are going to play in the future, and then the lights start coming down, then you get to the main feature. But if anyone comes in after the main feature is on, they got lights in the floor. Because what you saw there was a guy who used to have the flashlight making what you make an entry-level job, making entry-level wage, because he's not going to be in a job for a lifetime. That job is a job for teenagers, not for family people. And it gives that teenager a chance to get entry-level skills and get a resume in place so that when he goes to get a job that's more career structured, he has a resume that he worked at this job, and they got a person that can give him reference on that job he was on. He went to another minimum wage job, which paid maybe a little bit more money, and the reason why you get much more money without a minimum wage being invoked is because the next job requires another level of skill. So he moved from a job of flashlight. Didn't require a lot of skills. I just shine the flashlight at the floor, carry the guy to a seat, shine and see if there's a seat open, let him sit down, because it's dark in there. But then there's another job that's minimum wage job, not set by the politician, set by the market, and his skill level is a little bit more above that. That resume let him take this skill over here, and now he's making a little bit more money, not by government fiat, but because this job requires more skill, so it pays a little bit more.
Did you know that in the projectionist in movie, the old projectionists, they still use movies, they don't use video. Anyway, the projectionists in most theaters in this area were making $25 an hour at one time. I don't know if you knew that. This was a few years ago. $25 an hour plus benefits. I mean, that's pretty high.
Pretty high. My first job was I had my first job when I was a student in college. I had not worked in high school. Most of the jobs there weren't a couple of jobs really open at that time. I'm talking about Birmingham, Alabama. You could be a paper boy, and you have to have a bicycle. So they eliminated my job, any job that I would have. I couldn't even afford a bicycle, and then there was only one job available in the community, throwing the paper. And then you had a job at the ice house, and that job was filled. They only needed one person in the ice house, and they had a business and the shoe shine, not shoe shine, but the shoe repair, and they only needed a person there that would carry the shoes once the shoes had been repaired. You could deliver the shoes. Well, there were just not that many jobs for teenagers. So what I did, though, to make it up, was I had a coat hanger business. I had a pop bottle business, and I had a shoe shine business where I would carry my shoe shine box around. And I would find somebody who needed a shoe shine. I would ask if I could shine their shoes. Now, what would I charge? I wouldn't charge minimum wage. I would try to undercut the guy that was doing that in the shoe repair place, and I would charge a nickel, which was certainly not minimum wage. And I would try to hit the cloth in such a way to make his feet feel good in his shoes, so that he feel like I worked hard and maybe give me another additional amount of money. If I could shine the shoes really, we could see his face in the shoes, and I could hit that cloth a certain way and brush the shoe, get the polish off, and make the shoe shine. Maybe get a quarter out of the deal. But I set a very minimum wage because I didn't need to pay any rent. I was just trying to get enough money for things that teenagers buy. Yo-yo, some of the toys, some Cracker Jacks. Take me out to the ball game, buy me some Cracker Jacks. I could buy my own Cracker Jacks, and the game was free because they played the game out in the open. Some of these semi-professionals You just walk in there and see the game. You get your Cracker Jacks, which you bought with your own money, and no problem. You weren't paying the rent, weren't paying the light bills, and the water bill was paid by your parents. All you wanted was some spending money, which they never. They never gave me. My parents never gave me an allowance. I had to earn my allowance. And this idea of you gonna make your bed up and you get paid for that, they weren't buying that. You made your bed up because you slept in it. So those jobs were entry-level jobs. But if you had one, you were building a resume to the job that paid more money. And I was saying earlier, John, that when I was working in my first real job, which is I was in college by that time, and my skills were such, I was able to work as a farm worker. And my pay was $1.25 an hour. That's what I got paid. I can't sit here and say that I was making $5, $8 an hour. The minimum wage is $1.25, and that's what they paid. But I worked 12 hours, and by the end of the day, I had $15 that I had made for that day. And I could pay, if I saved up the whole summer for 3 months, I had enough money to start the first semester off in college. And then I had to play it by ear as I went through the school year, finding ways to make more money as the school year unfolded. All I needed was a head start, so that was covered. And then I worked during the school year. I can make up the rest of the money for the second semester. And then the summer comes up again. This is, SOS, same old stuff. And I was able to do a rotation in terms of paper. As the cost, what happened too? As the cost went up, and that no longer was working for me. By the time I got to be a junior, the cost had increased, not prohibitively because the government had not gotten involved in it yet. So it's going up in order to meet the new costs. Inflation was not a problem. And so they would go up as the cost would increase slightly. So I had to find another additional way of finding revenue. And so that's when I was a junior. That's when I started playing baseball. So I was adding to my protocol. Working the summer, got enough money saved up to start the first semester, working toward the second semester, and during the first semester, working during the school year, and then as a work study student, and then playing baseball when it became prohibitive and that no longer covered my costs. I played baseball in my junior year and my senior year to make up the additional money. And I did not have one, and as a poor kid, I didn't owe a nickel when I came out of college. I was debt free. And I'm talking about poorer than poor, and I didn't have any debts to go to college. Try that now with them setting all these policies in place, minimum wage laws, all these laws that they pass regulating business and things of that sort. And those of you that's out there, as I said in my post on Facebook, those of you that's out there demonstrating against businesses, you're out there in front of Mickey D's and Mickey Mouse, and you're out there demonstrating, talking about pay me $15 an hour, you ought to be demonstrating against the government. Ask the question, why is it that you can sign to an entry-level job, which is on the first rung of the economic ladder? Why you can sign to that job and cannot use that resume at the entry level and go to the next level on that ladder, which pays you more based upon the fact that you got more experience now, and therefore you're worth more as a worker at the next level. Where is that next level closed out to you? And that's not Mickey D's, because you work at Mickey D's now. Why is that next rung on that ladder not there for you to step up to and work at a job that requires more skills than what you had when you had the entry-level job at McDonald's? Ask that question. And that won't put you in front of Mickey D's, but put you in front of the building up there in Washington where Congress meets, or in front of the White House at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. There's some other folks involved at that point, but you don't see what role they're playing in it. And that's why you think that the problem is that McDonald's is wrong for not paying you the salary that you think you need to live on. And there's not a capitalist in this country that's going to buy that argument that they ought to pay you what you want for a salary rather than paying you what your production is in terms of your contribution to that company, because they're not paying you what you want. They're paying you what you're adding to the business, because their whole thing is your level of production as at this level, and they're only paying you at the minimum wage because some government employer does not understand the economic process. They understand economics, that you're paid according to your production and what you add to the profit of the company that employs you. And when you make them pay more than that, what they do to respond to it is, in fact, to lay you off. I made this other point in the post. I was giving the example of, as I got through talking about old money and new money, I was giving an example of what happened with, I went to the store. I was telling them that I went, and one of the things I bought was 2 bags of potato chips, and the bag was like this right here, one of those larger size bags. But when I looked at the size of the bag, which was 10 ounces of potato chips, now this bag is this big, that can hold at least a pound of potato chips. They got 10 ounces in there. So when you open the bag up, you got to reach down into the bag, almost at the bottom of the bag, certainly halfway in the bag, and then that's where the first chip is. It's not, it's not up there at the top of the bag where the chips used to be. What the capitalists did, because the politicians are now killing the dollar and making the dollar worthless, and therefore inflating the currency. So they're responding to it by, they can't change the size of the bag, because then your response is, I can't pay $4 for 2 bags of this and the bags like that. Each bag is like that. So they got the same size bag, but if I paid $4 for 2 bags of that, then each bag cost $2. One bag was for the potato chips, and the other dollars was for the air, which I wish I could, in fact, find a way to suck it out in case I have a flat tire on the way from the store. I can then put the air in the tire at least and get home. But you can't take it once you open up, the air is out the bag, but you got to reach down to the bag to get the potato chips, because what he's doing there is responding to the politicians' reckless behavior, and that's his response is to, in fact, keep the bag the same size, reduce the quantity of the potato chips, and just inch the price up a little bit. And what he's doing is responding to the politicians. That's what that is about. I see the same thing going on in all of the prices in the store. Have you noticed those cans? I like, for a nice snack, I like tuna with saltine. And that's a pretty good, nighttime meal. It's light, and you can eat that, your hunger in the evening, without, blowing up with eating something more heavy like potatoes and things of that sort. So I'll take that as a snack. But when I go and buy the can of tuna, which are now mixed with more eggs to make more, tuna, because the can has been downsized. It used to be 6 1/4 ounces of tuna in the can. I didn't get the can down to a certain size, and I would think they put more water in there too. Or if it's like oil based tuna, then they got more oil in there and less tuna. But the can is even smaller, and now the can, what used to be 6 1/4 ounce, is now reduced down to 5 ounces, and they've increased the price up a little bit. You can probably get a can for about 79 cents when it used to be like 3 cans for $1, but the dollar's not worth anything. So now what they're doing is they're making the quantities smaller and raising the prices a little bit so it's not prohibitive. Or you're not going to say, I'm not buying that at that price. They have to raise the price because the dollar's worthless. And then they have to reduce the quantity so that the price is not raised to the level the dollar's value is, which is, $5 a can if it's 6 1/4 ounces. So reduce the quantity. And I think they put a little bit more water in there, quite frankly, because you have to now take the can, once you open it, and you hold the thing down, the top of the can down, and squeeze the water out, and the water flowing out of there. You think you might as well drink. If it was pure water, you could drink it. Have your glass of water, because the capitalists are finding a way to do business under these circumstances. So I'm glad to see Mark Levine coming out with this book, because what Mark Levine did was that he wrote a book that I don't think I caused it, but I was writing about the need for amendments to the Constitution last year. And I noticed some of the things that Mark Levine was in fact proposing in response to what these politicians are doing. I noticed that what Mark Levine was doing was in fact, what he's doing in his book is responding to what they're doing by saying we got to tie these guys down again because they've become unchained. Because the framers had intended to chain the politicians down by doing a number of things: separation of powers, the check and balance system, the federal structure where the powers are so much on the federal level and the rest of it is reserved to the states. So the federal structure where the federal government has some powers, the rest of it is among the states. The enumeration of powers in Article 1, Section 8. All this was intended to chain the federal government down because they knew how dangerous it would be if it got out of control. So I was calling for this last year. I couldn't get it off the ground because, quite frankly, it's going to take a national figure to publicize this that is much more in the national landscape, and I'm not really on the national level as much. And so I was very glad to see Mark Levine picking that up. And I'm not saying he got it from me, but some of the same points he's making in his book called the Liberty Amendments, I propose the same thing that he's proposing. He did an interview with Breitbart, the Breitbart News, that interviewed Mark Levine about the what he calls the Liberty Amendments. And they asked him, Breitbart News asked Mark Levine, they said the Liberty Amendments you're attempting to launch is that of a movement to amend the Constitution. Do you expect to be successful, and how long will it take? Well, Mark Levine gave, I thought, a classic answer here, and he said, what I hope to do, at least in some small way, is to begin a discussion among those of us who believe the Republic is unraveling. And I don't think there's anybody out there that think the Republic is not unraveling right before our very eyes. And find a way to reestablish the Constitution as a law of the land and reclaim our heritage. When you look at the massive debt and the reckless monetary policies of the federal government, the ability of the Supreme Court jurors to pervert the Constitution and impose by fiat their personal policy preferences on the whole of society without any recourse, Congress is legislating through massive bills outside the enumerated powers as found in Article 1, Section 8, and its delegation of unchecked power to a massive and growing bureaucracy which legislates thousands of times each year by regulatory fiat, and the increasing authoritarianism of presidents who issue executive orders to create their own law and also blatantly rewrite statutes by interpretation and executive based, or whether they agree with these laws or not. I think this and much more evinces the growing and steady decline of constitutional republicanism. Now, how long it's going to take, he says, as I've concluded that Washington is incapable of reforming itself, which should seem fairly obvious. After all, it has designed the federal Leviathan, which is getting bigger and more regressive. And I was thinking, what has this federal government become? It's not going to be, given what it's become, it's not going to be changed overnight. But what Mark Levine is trying to do here is to, in fact, start the conversation, at least, about something has to be done, and he is, in fact, proposing a way in which we can, in fact, intervene. Because this idea of speaking truth to power You know, I'm bringing some bad news here, I guess, when I say this, but I have to say it because I know it to be true. And that is this idea of speaking truth to power is primarily, in the absence of any power you bring to the table, is a waste of time. I mean, I'm with you in going to Washington. I just read on Facebook that some of you are going to Washington on 9/11/2013. I'm glad to see you organizing those trips, that you are going to be going to Washington, make your voices heard, and all of that. But primarily, those kinds of expressions of your outrage of what government is doing is basically a waste of time. They're not listening to you up there in Washington. Those politicians could care less of what you're talking about. We can see that in terms of them trying to pretend that they are, in fact, investigating these violations, which are called by the president phony scandals. That should be something that you have an alarm in your head. Them talking about 4 people that died in Benghazi, one of whom was an ambassador representing the United States of America, and his death is described by the president as a phony scandal. The IRS investigating people for their political views. That's a phony scandal. The fact that the NSA is in fact spying on us, that's a phony scandal. And the fact that the president was talking about the one that was a whistleblower, I think this patriot, Edward Snowden, is being spoken of in terms of him being a non-patriot, from telling us that the government is spying on us. But the NSA these are patriots. The president called them patriots and assured us that we should be as non-concerned about what they're doing as he is, because he wants to assure us that they are working within the law. Well, the law requires them to get a search warrant. That's the law according to the Constitution, not the law according to the Patriot Act, which is unconstitutional, by the way. That's why it's not illegal for them to do it, only unconstitutional. And to be trusted, Mr. President, I don't think so, because the Constitution is the law of the land, not the Patriot, which is in violation of it. So we're told that everything is going hunky-dory in the government, and we don't need to be concerned about what they're doing in Washington, D.C. But I am buying into what Mark Levine is saying, because I know what he's saying to be true. We've got to have the Constitution revisited so that we can continue the work that was done by the framers under the old set of circumstances that do not apply right now, because there's some new things that have kicked in. And we got to now deal with this new thing that's unraveling this republic, where it's got to be chained down under new conditions that will be set now in the Constitution being altered, and putting new regulations in place, not for businesses, which that's where they think the problem is. We got to put new regulations in place, not on the business community and those that are producing a service that are regulated by the consumers. We got to put regulations in place for the politicians. And that's the thing that Mark Levine is talking about in this book, called the, don't want to misquote him here, the Liberty Amendments. If we're going to have liberty, we've got to have amendments to the Constitution for these politicians in Washington, all 535 of the members of Congress. And those they pass off the, what they pass their power off to in these ancillary groups, so that they can act in their name and not pay any political costs, like the EPA, for example, and all these groups. They're passing off their regulatory power to, so that what they regulate, they are insulated because they are appointed by the politicians, and we can't get to them through our vote. You know, we're catching on to that game, though, and that's why there are 3 persons that are running against Lindsey Graham in South Carolina, and that's a very good thing that's going on, and some of them are being forced to step down because we didn't found them out. I understand that John McCain is stepping down in 2014. And John Dingell, who's been up there 57 years, sleeping in committee meetings and sleeping through hearings half the time, I heard he's getting out of there. in 2014. I think he's been.
You just said McCain's not going to.
I heard that McCain is leaving.
Oh man, I wish the Republicans would kick him out of the party.
Yeah, I would like for him to run again, so we would have the satisfaction of throwing him out of power. But and I think that's what is coming out of the woodwork right now to show who he really was. This guy was a person running the Republican Party and running really in a party that he had no affiliation with based upon his policies. Now we see it very clearly. And that's also true of this guy over there in New Jersey, Christie. Christie's a Democrat.
Yeah, I mean,
I
can't stand Christie, and people are saying, well, he's the most electable. I said, so the only way the Republicans are going to get elected is if they become Democrats.
Yeah.
So why be even pretend like we have these two parties?
We had, you know what, John, in the 49th district, we had a person running in the 49th district here in Genesee County that had recognized, I'm not calling a name out, but everybody in the county knows who I'm talking about that voted in the primary on August the 6th. This person recognized in the 49th district, we've not had a Republican hold that seat since Truman. In other words, for the last how many years it would be going back to the Truman administration, we haven't had a single Democrat hold that seat. So this person comes out of the Republican Party and runs in the Democrats and then tells us, well, I have changed my values. Well, you're in the Democratic Party. Something has changed. And, you know, lost the election. Came in, I think came in second. But that's what they do. They run in the party when they can win. But their values have not changed in terms of what they carry over into the party they're running in. John McCain is as much of a Democrat. And this guy over there, Bloomberg, who ran as an independent, Bloomberg is as much of a Democrat as anybody is. His idea he's an independent. Independent of what?
He's not smart enough to be independent. He's basically swallowed hook, line, and sinker the Democrat Party's manual. I mean, yeah. So that's why he considers himself independent.
John, if they know how to create jobs with their interference, what job has Anthony Weiner, who thinks he's the brother of Mr. Johnson, what job does Anthony Weiner know how to create? In other words, Weiner, you're not in Congress right now. You had to leave there, and you're fighting your way to get back into a job you can have in the government dole. And that's why you're running for the mayor, and they're now finding you out, so your chances of getting that seat is waning, and you're now making your first ad as of today. I understand you put your first ad on, and I got to look at that and get a laugh out of it as you tell us that you're going to do a great job in there, and you're not going to be sidetracked, you're not going to be distracted from being on the internet, sex texting while you are supposed to be taking care of the people's business. I mean, we believe that. We believe that you've handled your addiction and not going to be able to get sidetracked because you handle your psychiatric problem. But you were given a chance when you left the Congress last year to go out and create a job, and you're unemployed right now, and trying to get back in the government dole because you weren't able to create a job. But you all get in power, telling us that you're going to create jobs. Well, you guys.
Well, another thing that gets me too. Okay, the other day, all these progressives are posting this picture of Bill Clinton's got his arm raised, and he's got these free pictures of other presidents who are Republican, and it's captioned as "Raise your hand if you balance the budget." And it's like, and there's these they have Clinton taking credit for balancing the budget in his term. And I keep on bringing this up. Every time they bring it up, I went, yes, but he had a House and a Senate. It was a Republican largely. Oh, yeah, but it's more,
exactly.
It matters more when the executive branch doesn't want.
They leave that out.
Crap.
Yeah, why do they leave that out? That he began to run a more austere budget in 1994, and this guy was elected in 1992, took office in 1993, and all of a sudden we're seeing some austerity measures being put in place in 1994, and we don't hear anybody talking about that's when the Democrat lost power in the House and the Senate, and we now have the Republicans holding that guy, chaining that guy down. And when we didn't have it chained down, we saw government expansion and spending money out of control and growing the deficit, which under Obama, now he took over where the deficit was 10.6 trillion, and we're looking at now going toward 17 trillion. I know you want to say 16 trillion because that's like, $4.99, and we're supposed to look at that as being $400 rather than $500. playing with the numbers. Liars can figures don't lie, but liars can figure. And so you're gonna grow jobs, and you know something about economy, and we're there sitting there watching the reality where the debt is $16 trillion and counting. And no businessman, by the way, has ever had that kind of debt in all the companies that's ever existed in the entire universe of America. I mean, go back and look at the beginning of the nation back in 17. What do you want to date the nation? Do you want to date it at the 1776 time period, or do you want to date it at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, 1787? Whichever date you choose, let's start wherever you want to start out and come all the way up to 2013, and you show me all the businesses that ever existed. That's Studebaker, that's Nash, that's Hudson, all these businesses that came in and went out because when they had a deficit and could not make could not force the consumer to buy their product, they went the way of the West. In those movies where they ride off in the sunset? They rode off in the sunset, and they don't exist anymore. All the businesses combined, John, never had a debt. And that's all of them added together. The sum total of all those from let's take it the latest date, 1787, all the way to 2013. Let's do the math. However many years that is, all the businesses that ever existed in this country never grew up a debt of $16 trillion. And we got one Congress, one, with different office holders, and these jokers have created a debt of $16 trillion and unfunded liabilities. The latest count is the unfunded liabilities. John, $200 trillion is the latest estimate of the amount of indebtedness they have when those debts are called in. And there's only about $77 trillion of debt, of wealth on the entire planet. Not all of it is in the United States, by the way. We only got $15 trillion of wealth in terms of our GDP. And did anybody out there hear this joker, this madman? We're trying to chain him down too, Mark Levine. The one named Keith Ellison. That guy from Minnesota. The one who took the oath of office. Are you with me here? You still with me? The one took the oath of office on the Bible, on the Quran, that was bought by Thomas Jefferson, the third president, because he was trying to understand this derangement out here called Islam. And those of you telling me on my post today, they try to tell me that I was wrong for saying that the two guys that came from Chechnya were Middle East. I didn't call them Middle East. I said that we let Middle East from Syria come in here. And they said, well, the two guys that bombed Boston was from Chechnya. They weren't from Middle East. It doesn't matter. Because let me tell you something that you all didn't know. And that is this, is that if you think there are any moderate Muslims, let Mouse holler at you, there are no moderate Muslims. Now you say, well, not all Muslims are bombing them. Let me tell you why. Because those aren't Muslims. Those are Christians. Those are Christians under the Muslim umbrella. I was just telling you a minute ago about there are some Democrats in Republican garb. Okay, what you have there is that you have Muslims, you have Christians under Muslim garb because they're not following the Quran. You can just take that to the bank. Those are Christians. And so this idea that they're moderate Muslims, that's because y'all are buying the Kool-Aid that when they bomb us is workplace, violence and not jihad. And by the way, that's Hassan. There is Nadal Hassan. John, have you been listening to his testimony?
Yeah, he's.
Where that guy's up there telling them, yeah, I feel sorry. I was a mujahideen, meaning a warrior for Islam. That guy is a colonel in the armed forces, And they knew what this guy was, in fact, writing on his wall, but through the tyranny of we cannot tell the truth in this country. You can call it political correctness. What it is, the tyranny that we have in this country, another form of tyranny that you call political correctness because you don't want to give anything its rightful name, the tyranny of being compelled to lie to each other in this country. It's not political correctness, that's tyranny.
Well, did you hear, too, that the shooter, Hassan, actually is collecting a paycheck where the family members who survived the attacks, the survivors' the victims' families, are not getting paid. This man's family is getting paid his paycheck.
John,
the murderer has.
What are we looking at here? That is that's a tip of the iceberg there. I mean, underneath it is all this other stuff. There's a layer of the corruption of our federal system, and that is the tip of the iceberg there, because we got 13 people that were killed at Fort Hood. 13 people lost their lives because they disarmed everybody else at Fort Hood. Fortunately, someone arrived with a gun. They're trying to take that out of the hands of our people. And someone arrived with a gun that put this guy down. And he's now paralyzed. Shot him and stopped him because it takes a gun to stop another gun. You're not going to talk that gun out of that guy's hand. And he's up there telling us that he was here in a high-level position in our military. And he's saying that he was a Mujahideen, and his only apology is not in terms of shooting and killing 13 and wounding 30 some odd others. His apology was to the Al-Qaeda. They didn't do enough damage, that he failed in his mission to kill even more persons. And they're talking just workplace violence with a guy hollering Allahu Akbar as he's shooting us. Shooting Americans down at the fort that they had before they sent off in to fight the battles to defend this country. That guy's in a high-level position in the military, and I'm told that they got a Muslim in this guy that is over the Defense Department. How do you justify that? This guy either over defense, or is it the guy that's over the CIA? Oh, the CIA. I mean, this is incredible what's going on here. So when you start talking about getting paid, they're paying these guys, and they're paying the rebels in Syria, which is Al Qaeda, and they're getting ready to let some of them in here as the refugees in the country, and that's being talked about. How did you get around what this is? And what is that? It's treason, actionable under Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution. So we got to amend some things here. Now let me say this before I get off the air, because Mark Levine is right on target about we need to have some amendments added to the Constitution to further chain down government. And I'll just make this one point. He doesn't understand Article 5 that well. He's correct in saying that we can go around much of the federal government to amend the Constitution, but he's wrong in saying that you can go around Congress. What Mark Levine doesn't understand is that the 2/3, his process was 2/3 of the states can call a convention through which they propose that which would be 3/4 of the state would ratify that which is proposed. That's not true. 2/3 of the state can appeal to Congress to call the convention, through which the proposals will be ratified by 3/4 of the states. But Congress is involved in terms of the petition must go to the Congress, and they, in the name of the states, will then call the convention. And from that point, the states are in charge of the amendment process. Okay, well, we got to get out of here. As always, enjoy coming before you and talking about some things that is starting another conversation here, the one you and I need to have, that doesn't have to do anything with those persons that are regulating the speech through political correctness and FCC regulations. Until next time, we want you to follow your dream, because until you do that, you will never know what's on the other side of the rainbow. See you next week.